What is up, Pitt fans? Thank you so much for tuning in to Inside the Panthers on YouTube. My name is Stephen Thompson, coming to you from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where Pitt, well, not much is guaranteed for them after this. They lose 72-65, a hard-fought game. Top-seeded, number 4 ranked North Carolina in the ACC Semifinals. The Panthers have never made an ACC Tournament final, and that streak will continue because the Panthers just didn't have enough offense in this game. They come up just a little bit short against one of the top-ranked teams in the country, a team trending towards a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. It was a hard-fought game. I think it's hard to walk away, discouraged by this game. But look, this was a big hit to the Panthers' postseason chances. We'll talk about it in a little bit. We'll get more into detail on that, but Jack, where did you kind of see things go wrong for the Panthers? Was there a moment in this game where you felt like that they were out of it, or that they weren't really going to pull it off?
Yeah, I think the turning point, or what really, turned the tide, was the duo of RJ Davis and Armando Bacot. It all comes back to them, especially once Davis got going. The Panthers are always going to have a tough time containing both him and Bacot, especially since they were forced to double Bacot down low with both Diaz, Graham, and Federico in foul trouble. Considering how dominant Bacot was to open the game and really throughout. In terms of standout moments where I felt like it got away from Pitt, I think you started to see there was a little bit of foreshadowing when Pitt went up 8 in the first half. Then UNC erased that deficit within 2.5 minutes. Not that necessarily was a turning point, but I think that sort of set the tone. It showed you that North Carolina was just sort of on a different level, had Pitt's number in a lot of ways. And Davis, himself hit a couple huge jump shots, but I think the one that really set everything in stone was his 3 after low tied it on his floater with a little over 4 minutes left. That took the wind out of Pitt's sails. When it seemed like the Panthers may actually, pull off a comeback. I think Bacot's dunk and transition off of a steal also energized UNC. That gave them some momentum. So I think those are the moments in particular, where I think the game got away from the Panthers. I think a lot of the second half showed us why UNC is so highly regarded. I felt like a lot of the game, especially on the offensive end for Pitt, felt a lot like their road game against Clemson, where they had no answer for UNC's defense. They weren't getting quality looks, and then UNC could do no wrong on the other end, drawing contact, moving the ball effortlessly. And you saw Pitt become a bit dejected at points, I felt like. So not a ton of glimpses of the high-energy team that we've seen when they're really clicking. And I think that really all culminated in their loss.
Yeah, for me, I completely agree. I mean, you talked about Davis and Bacot. I believe it was in the second half, not that deep into it. The Tar Heels went on an 8-0 run. It was 11-3 if you want to go back that far, and Davis and Bacot scored all 11 points. It lasted about a little over 3 minutes. Pitt only scored 1 field goal over that span. Bacot was just a force, and he was a force partially because, like you mentioned, Pitt's forwards were in foul trouble. Pitt's centers were in foul trouble. I think really the turning point was when Federico picked up his 3rd personal foul in the first half. And then Diaz Graham, after a really strong first half, got into foul trouble himself. You can complain about the whistle. You can complain about the whistles all you want, but that's just who Armando Bacot is. I mean, he's a little bit like Joel Embiid in that sense. He's just good at drawing fouls. I don't know if he gets necessarily a more favorable whistle than anyone else in the league, but he's been around a long time. He's a savvy guy, and he is also just miles stronger and bigger than Pitt centers right now. Pitt just wasn't able to match up physically to that challenge. Not necessarily a knock against them, at least at this point, because Armando Bacot does that to a lot of people. But Pitt's centers were just not up to the task today. We've seen at times them be able to stand up to some really physical front court guys, but today was just not that day. And Bacot really exposed them, and I feel like they were kind of put at a disadvantage from the start. The way that Federico got into foul trouble so early, and then early in the second half, Diaz Graham did the same thing. I think Fedi picked up his 3rd foul with 6:43 left in the first half. From there on, it didn't look good. and you knew that Pitt was going to be fighting an uphill battle from that point on. They kept it close. I mean, it was a 2 or 3 possession game for most of the second half. Believe UNC only went up about 7 or so. That was their largest lead of the game. They won by 7, but they only went up by 7, 1, 2, 3, 4 times in the second half. The vast majority of this game, Pitt was either leading. They led for, I think, about 12 minutes of the first half, and UNC only led for, want to say 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes of the first half. So Pitt was in control for most of this game, really up until that 8-0 run I mentioned in the second half. And like I said, Baycott just kind of became a force in nature, and then it became tough to get stops. It became tough to rely on their defense, and then just not enough shots were falling, and it all kind of spilled out from there. So a frustrating day that, Pitt was just kind of put in a disadvantage from the start. But I mentioned the lack of buckets. You mentioned the kind of struggles that came on offense, and I think a big reason for that was the play of Blake Hinson and Ishmael Leggett. They combined for only 11 points. Hinson shot 2 of 12 from the field, 0 of 5 from 3. Leggett was 2 of 7 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3. Almost a complete no-show, if we're going to put it frankly. And these are 2 of Pitt's best players. They're 2 of their most reliable offensive players, and Pitt didn't get their best games from these guys tonight. Blake Hinson, after the game, took a lot of the blame. He said pretty plainly, I'm paraphrasing here, but he pretty much said it was his fault that they lost. He said he didn't do his job. He complimented the rest of his team, but said that he did not do his job well enough. What do you think kind of went into these nights, these off nights? I mean, Hinson, I think in particular, he was barely hitting the rim, especially on a lot of those 5 3-pointers that he took, and all of them that he missed.
Yeah, he's had a few of these games down the stretch, but I felt like he was particularly off tonight. He scored 5 points, which is tied for a season low. Attempted 5 threes, and like you said, made none of them. He wasn't particularly close to making any of them either. Only the 3rd time this year he hasn't made one too. I think he opened the game with the intent of posting up and barreling his way towards the rim with a mismatch, primarily with Cormac Ryan. But UNC did such a good job of staying disciplined, clogging the lane as to where he never got a clear look. And then from behind the arc, again, there was extra attention paid to him, as there should be and as there has been really all year. And I felt like he was forcing it at times. I think he picked and chose his spots to be aggressive, didn't pay off, tried to will Pitt back into it down the stretch. It's worked in the past, didn't have it tonight. And UNC gave him no breathing room either. And Pitt played through Carrington and Lowe, who we'll talk about in a minute, for most of the night, and for good reason. Those 2 were incredible, but that resigned Hinson to sort of a secondary role where he just wasn't super involved. Probably didn't help him get settled in. Who knows how much of a difference that really made. And then on to Ish Leggett. It was always going to be hard for him to follow up his Wake performance. That's like a career kind of night. And the circumstances just weren't in his favor tonight, truthfully. Like I said, Lowe and Carrington were on the floor almost all night, 77 of a possible 80 minutes. And with UNC's length and dominance down low, we talked about the foul trouble with Pitt's bigs. Pitt had to play a bigger lineup just, based on how the game was going. And he still did record 28 minutes, but there weren't as many opportunities around the rim, which is where he, had the most success against the Demon Deacons. And you could tell from the beginning that his jump shot was off too. He didn't have it. He had a couple clutch buckets down the stretch in the second half that kept Pitt in it, but he just never got into the swing of things for a majority of the night, at least from a scoring perspective. And, when Leggett and Hinson aren't on, 2 of your leading scorers, Pitt just doesn't stand much of a chance. I think we saw pretty close to a worst case scenario tonight.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, this was, a perfect storm, an imperfect storm, if you want to put it that way. But just Hinson, you could tell when those first few kind of misfired, and it took a while for him to kind of get his first shot up. He was not getting involved in the game particularly early, but you could just kind of tell something was off, and that happens to shooters sometimes. Like Blake Hinson's a guy who relies on his jump shot a ton. Like you said, he tried to get involved going to the basket a little bit, but that wasn't really working either. Pitt as a team was pretty poor attempted shots at the rim outside of, Carrington and Lowe particularly. But Hinson just there was nothing there from him, and part of me just wants to chalk it up to it was one of those nights. He was going up against one of the better defensive players in the country, I would say, especially a wing defender in Harrison Ingram. That guy is strong, he's athletic, and he's really really smart, I think. So I mean that these kind of nights happen for a guy like Hinson, and Leggett, I feel like is. I don't know. I didn't explain very much with Hinson, but Leggett, his struggles were even more inexplicable to me. This guy was just missing shots at the rim that, not only did we see him make against Wake Forest, but that we've seen him make all season long. And it was tough to watch sometimes. And just when those guys are limited, it shrinks what UNC had to do defensively. It's already a good defensive team, and they were able to focus their efforts more intently on Lowe and Carrington, who, were really threatening them. It was not a good night. And I think especially for Leggett too, just Pitt's inability to play in transition, especially in the second half. They had a tough time getting stops, especially late in the second half. And I feel like Leggett is a guy who thrives in transition a bunch. And when those opportunities weren't really there very often, it was a little bit tougher for him to score. You did mention they had a couple of really tough buckets late in the second half that gave Pitt a chance. But when you have two guys like this, two guys who are your best players, your primary scorers, if you're going to beat a top 5 team, you need them to be at their best. And it's pretty remarkable that Pitt was only down, 5 or 6 for most of that second half and only end up losing by 7 with the way that Hinson and Leggett played in this game. But you're not going to win when those guys play that way. It's pretty simple. I mean, it sounds pretty obvious if 2 of your top, I'd say 4 best players, play this way. If they don't play well, you're not going to win. I feel like that's true of just about every basketball team in the country, professional or college or otherwise. It's just tough to win that way. We'll go to a few positive things because this was, I think, kind of overwhelmingly a positive result for Pitt. I know they want to win. There are no moral victories, but this was a top 5 team that they took pretty much down to the wire. They gave UNC just about everything that they could handle, and were really close to making their first ACC tournament final in program history. But they were that close really only because of the scoring of Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe. Carrington, 24 points, 9 of 7 from the field, 4 of 8 from 3, 5 rebounds and 3 assists to boot. And then Jalen Lowe, 17 points, 7 of 16 from the field, only 1 of 4 from 3, but did have 4 rebounds and 4 assists as well. 2 freshmen carrying the load. I mean, we've come to expect this from these guys. They're really good players, and on the biggest stage that they've played on all season, they played 2 of their best games of the season. I think Carrington, that's pretty close to his best game of the season, I would venture to say. What did you feel like was working for them? And does this give you a little bit of hope for the future? Because we also did get to talk to Bub Carrington after the game, and he said that he plans to come back for a sophomore season. So how much confidence does this give you to know that Pitt has 2 young stars playing this well on such big stages against such good teams?
Yeah, it gives me all the confidence in the world, honestly, because we've seen how this duo can match up with other premier backcourts in the country. And another offseason together can make that connection even more lethal for those 2. Bub scored 24 points, shot 9 of 17 from the field and 4 of 8 from behind the arc. Third 20-plus point game in a 5-game stretch. He had 2 of those kinds of performances before that span. And then Lowe shot 7 of 16, much more aggressive as opposed to the Wake game. 17 points with 4 rebounds and 4 assists. And I don't think it is an overreaction to say that they have the potential to be one of the best starting backcourts in the country if they're not already. And Bub made that declaration himself in the post-game press conference, and I tend to agree. He has the potential, talking about Bub, to be an elite 2-way guard if he isn't already. He can pick up a lot of the scoring slack left behind by Hinson's absence next year. We've seen Pitt rely on him as a first option against Clemson and Boston College, the home game against Wake, against NC State in the regular season finale. And the offense never skipped a beat. I think his return makes all the difference in the world alongside Lowe, who stepped into the starting lineup in January and just took off, looked like a completely different player from where he was in November, December. He was dealing with an injury, but his development has been incredible to see. His entry into the starting lineup coincides with Pitt's turnaround. He's done incredible things as the primary ball handler. He brings an ease to the offense, brings a sense of control. It's not often you see a freshman guard with his level of instincts, playmaking ability, scoring ability, especially two of them. So, I think Pitt has a lot to be excited about moving forward. The potential is off the charts. We'll see how they supplement the roster around them, who stays, who goes. But Pitt fans should have every reason to be excited about this duo and more in the future.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think a lot of that confidence should come from, partially the fact that these guys play really well together. They fit really well together. You mentioned, Lowe stepping in the starting lineup and that kind of coinciding with Pitt taking a big step forward and really kind of becoming the team that we saw tonight and for the second half of the season. Jeff Capel kind of alluded to this and, actually said it pretty explicitly before heading down to DC, but that, you know, putting Lowe in the starting lineup allows him to be the primary point guard, him to be the primary ball handler, and he kind of share that role with Ish Leggett a little bit, while Carrington can be more of a two guard, which I think he fits a little bit better as. I don't think he's quite he's a good ball handler, he's a good playmaker. I don't want anyone to twist my words like that, but I think he fits better as maybe an off the ball guy a little bit more. I feel like he looks more comfortable when he doesn't have to do all of the ball handling, when he doesn't have to be just the only guy out there who can run offense and handle the ball. So he plays really well off of Lowe. Lowe plays really well off of Carrington. And these guys are improving defenders. Carrington, I'm glad you said that because I think Carrington can be a truly elite defender. He's got size, he's got strength, he's really athletic, and he's got good instincts as well. And Lowe has really come along as a defender as well and been really solid. So like you said, I mean, you should have all the confidence in the world in these guys. They're really great players. They fit well together. They like each other. I do want to ask you about, Bob Carrington saying that he's going to come back next season, saying he plans on coming back to Pitt for sophomore year. He has big plans, says that he and Jalen Lowe can be one of the best backcourts in the country if they aren't already. And he sounds hungry. And a lot can change though. We know this world of college athletics, it's very different than it was a long time ago. He'll have an option to maybe transfer if he wants to. I'm not saying that he has ever indicated that he would, but that is an option. But then he also might have the NBA calling, especially after a performance like this on national TV against a top 4 opponent, against a player like RJ Davis, who was the ACC Player of the Year. Do you take Carrington as word? Do you expect him to be back in blue and gold next year, or are you kind of waiting to see what happens?
I do think he was being sincere. I do get the sense that there's some unfinished business with the Panthers, but I also feel like he would be doing himself a disservice if he didn't at least test the NBA waters. He can enter and return to school, especially with how he finished the year. He is an NBA talent. I think he will get some draft buzz, some draft interest. So, I think there is a chance that he moves on. And especially in this landscape of college basketball, you never know. That's not, a slight against Bub or anything like that, but it's truly the Wild West. So you just never know how things are going to turn out, even when they feel like an 100% certainty. So, I do think he'll be back. He sounded sincere, like I said, in the, his post-game interviews, but I do think there still is a chance that he moves on. Maybe not transferring, but to the NBA, maybe he does transfer. Who knows? It's all up in the air. We'll see how things unfold in the next couple of weeks. If they don't make the NCAA tournament, a lot can change in that short amount of time. So as of right now, I would pencil Bub to be back next year with Lowe and be a dynamic backcourt like we talked about, but you truly never know.
Yeah, you're right, and you I think articulated it well. It's not a slight against Bub to say that he will have options. With that said, I would be stunned if he transfers somewhere else. I think if he's not at Pitt next year, it'll be because he's going professional. It'll be because he's looking at his NBA options. I just get the sense that I don't know these kids. I'm not in their head. I'm not with them all the time. I'm not a confidant for them or anything. But I just get the sense that there's such a tight relationship between Jalen Lowe and Bub Carrington and his team, the rest of his teammates, but Carrington and Capel as well. Bub mentioned this in his post-game press conference that he wasn't this highly recruited guy. I mean, he was a 4-star, but you look at his offers, and I believe I tweeted this at the beginning of the year, it was some low majors. It was a handful of Power Fives. It wasn't like he was a McDonald's All-American. He wasn't getting offers from Kentucky and Duke and everything like that. He wasn't, he wasn't getting the hype that we see him getting now when he was coming out of high school. And so I think he developed a kind of connection to Capel, who believed in him, who recruited him, who kind of dug out a diamond in the rough that that not many others saw. So I think there is an emotional connection to this program. And then, like you mentioned, I think this team feels like they can achieve a lot more. They won't have Blake Hinson next year. That'll be a big piece that they have to replace. But most of this roster is eligible to return outside of Hinson. They only have one senior. And so if you can keep that core together, I feel like they believe that they can do a lot of great things with another offseason of work, which with another year under their belts, a full season of experience, especially for these young guys, and a year of playing together too. I think that matters as well. So I do get the sense that he is being sincere. Like we said, that can change. I mean, NBA scouts are going to throw some numbers in front of him, but also I think it's a pretty easy sell to say to Carrington, who shot, I believe, only 31% from three this season. 32% from three this season. There's some room to grow. He is not a complete product or a complete player or a finished product, I should say. That's the word I was looking for. So if he can develop a more consistent 3-point shot, while also, he told us he wants to, figure out how to be a bit of a craftier finisher at the rim as well. So like he has goals, I think, and I think he knows where he can improve as a player. And I don't think it's a particularly difficult sell for Jeff Capel to say, "Hey, look, you stay in school for another year. Take care of whatever NIL, questions you might have, whatever needs you might have, and all that. All the while, we can get you better. We can get you prepared for the NBA, for a professional career. And I think it doesn't hurt that Pitt has guys in the NBA right now. You have guys like Mohamedou Gueye, who wasn't really an NBA guy before he came to Pitt, but after he left, he's signing 2-way contracts. He's signing deals with the Toronto Raptors. Same thing with Justin Champagnie. He was a 3-star recruit, kind of not a super highly recruited guy, but he's playing in the NBA right now, signing a full-time contract with the Wizards. I think there is proof, and then we'll see what Blake Hinson does. There could be more evidence out there. So I think you would be able to sell Carrington. I think, like you make a good point. He would be doing himself a disservice to not at least explore these options. But I'm kind of with you. I think he's sincere. I think he will explore those options. But if I had to bet on it right now, I would assume that Carrington is back as a Panther next season. That said, this season is not over yet. The Panthers are still in consideration for an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. They didn't do themselves much of a favor tonight, even though they played pretty well. I mean, at least if you look at Joe Lunardi's latest projections, they did not move. They did not move up or down. But a lot of other bubble teams did pick up crucial wins. Just looking through the scores from today, I mean, Texas A&M picked up a huge win this afternoon. You look at Mississippi State, they picked up a big win over Tennessee. Oregon beat a top 10 team in Arizona. Providence lost, but Ohio State came real close to beating Illinois. There were some bubble results that really did not go Pitt's way when they really needed them to. With that in mind, where do you kind of see Pitt's NCAA tournament odds? What do you make of their chances of making the postseason at this point after a loss to UNC?
I don't feel great, honestly. I think the bubble has been so stacked this year as compared to previous years. It feels like a lot of the teams in Pitt's range have captured, win after win in the conference tournaments. It's going to be a tough road. There's already doubts about their resume. I think the consensus among most bracketologists coming into today was that Pitt was going to have to beat North Carolina in order to feel secure about their spot in the field. That didn't happen, obviously. So I don't think their chances of making it are zero. But I'm not going to go into Selection Sunday with a ton of hope. I would love to be wrong. But just knowing the selection committee's history with focusing a lot on non-conference scheduling, strength of schedule. We saw it with Rutgers last year where they got left out with a somewhat similar resume along with Clemson. So, I feel like Pitt's body of work is tournament worthy. I said that yesterday after the Wake game, but I'm just not super confident that that's going to be the final decision when the field of 68 is announced in a couple days.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I think I agree with you too. I just look at all these bubble teams that are winning, that are building their resume, and I look at a Pitt team that doesn't have any more opportunities to build their resume. Like you said, I think they're tournament worthy. I think they're good enough to maybe even win a couple games in the tournament. They can compete there, but that's unfortunately not necessarily what the selection committee evaluates you on. They evaluate your resume. They evaluate, like you said, they put a big focus on that non-conference schedule, and you know you need other teams to clear out a little bit too. That's true of just about every team on the bubble. The margin is razor thin, and I think there still is a chance. I mean, Pitt was projected by Joe Lunardi as a last four out team. Jerry Palm from CBS has them last four in. But I think when you look at their tournament resume, when you look at where they stand on the bubble, you're counting on a lot of people being wrong, and a lot of people who have done this for a long time, not knowing what the selection committee is thinking, and the selection committee kind of zigging when they've zagged for most of this tournament's history and most of recent history. I'm not particularly confident either. I still think there's a chance, but if I had to put a number on it, I'd say about 70-30 that they don't make it. I am not optimistic. And that's, again, not to say that Pitt isn't an NCAA tournament worthy team, that they're not good enough. It is just a crowded bubble, man, and it is really hard to separate yourselves. And if you're Pitt and you wanted to be really confident, you had to win this game, and they didn't. They played really well in this game. They came close. They had a chance to win. They had a chance to lock up a chance to go to the NCAA tournament, and they didn't. And sometimes that happens, but we'll see how it happens. We'll see how it falls. We obviously don't know what the selection committee is thinking either. We're kind of working with the same batch of information that a lot of these bracketologists are, and if they're not confident, then I don't know much reason why we have to be. We should be confident, but again, we are not in the selection committee's heads. We don't know who they are considering on the bubble, where they had Pitt throughout the season, and where they and how they rank, non-conference schedules, and going into conference play and reviving yourself down the stretch, and having a great second half and finishing the year strong. There's so much that we don't know about their actual thought process, and we won't know until the Field of 68 is released on Sunday. Like you said, I believe the selection show is at 6:00. I'm not exactly sure, but Sunday afternoon, after all the rest of the conference championship games are over, I believe the Big Ten, the American, the SEC, and maybe one other have to wrap up their conference tournaments before we announce that final field of 68 that will make the NCAA tournament. We'll have you covered up until Selection Sunday and through Selection Sunday, through the end, the official end of the season, whenever that may be for these Pitt Panthers. Want to appreciate you all tuning in for another Inside Pitt postgame report. Won't be our last of the year. If Pitt doesn't make the NCAA tournament, I think they're pretty likely going to play in the NIT, so there will still be more Pitt basketball left to watch for the rest of the season, and we'll be here to cover all of it for you. But like I said, appreciate y'all tuning in to this Inside Pitt postgame report. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@InsideThePanthers, and find all of our reporting at InsideThePanthers.com. Thank you all for tuning in, like I said, and we will see you